Silent power, the untouchable strategy. There's a moment, quiet, unassuming, when you feel a stare piercing you from across the room. It's not rage, not even envy. It's something colder, calculated dislike, the kind that wants a reaction, the kind that feeds on your anger. But you don't blink, you don't flinch, you smile. And in that smile, a war ends before it even begins. Because here's the truth. In a world that screams for attention, silence is power. In a world addicted to reaction, restraint is dominance. You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. You don't need to defend your name in every room that it's dragged through. You just need to rise, quietly, consistently, and let the noise break itself. That's the Machiavellian way. The art of winning without fighting, of ruling without roaring, of cutting down giants without ever lifting a sword. Because Machiavelli understood something timeless. The mind is the battlefield, and the weapon, indifference. Let them hate. It's a gift. Here's the beautiful irony. When someone hates you, they're giving you something. Time, energy, focus. They're handing you free rent in their head, obsessing over your every move, every silence, every smile. They're busy building your image in their mind while you're building your empire in silence. And here's the real twist. The more obsessed they become with bringing you down, the more irrelevant they make themselves. Because hate is reactive. Power is proactive. They're playing emotional chess with a person who stopped sitting at the board. You're already gone. The smile they can't read. Think about it. When you smile at someone who despises you, it throws their whole script into chaos. They expected tension. They wanted drama. They were prepared for a verbal war, not a warm greeting. And that smile, that unreadable, composed, unsettling smile, that's psychological warfare. It says, you're not even in my league. It says you don't matter enough to fight. It says you think I'm here to respond, but I've already moved on. They hate you, and you smile. That smile becomes a mirror. And in it, they don't see victory, they see desperation. The kind that festers in silence, unchecked and unbearable. Reaction is their victory. Stillness is yours. When someone slanders you, lies about you, mocks you, what they're begging for is a reaction. Any reaction. Because even your anger validates their importance. But what happens when you don't respond? What happens when you don't give them the scene they rehearsed for? Their entire play falls apart. The spotlight fades. The audience loses interest. And worst of all, the villain they painted you to be never shows up. That's the slow death of ego. Not in flames, but in silence. The most devastating sentence? Indifference. Hate can be fought. Contempt can be debated. But indifference? Indifference is unanswerable. It's not just silence. It's the absence of need. The refusal to step down into the mud. It tells them, you're not worthy of my strategy. And that's the most devastating sentence you can pass on an enemy. Not I'll get you back. Not you'll regret this. But nothing at all. Because nothing terrifies a fragile ego more than being ignored. Obsession destroys itself. Obsession is a loop. The more energy they pour into you, the more they starve their own growth. They waste time watching your life like it's their own, while their own dreams rot on the shelf. And meanwhile, you're not even looking back. You're focused. You're building. You're evolving. You're becoming someone they couldn't reach even if they tried. They're at war with a version of you that no longer exists. And that's the true tragedy of their obsession. It's always one step behind. Strategic silence isn't passivity, it's precision. Let's be clear, silence doesn't mean inaction. It means calculation. It means you've chosen not to spend your strength on things that don't deserve it. You're not ignoring them because you're scared. You're ignoring them because they're beneath the level you operate on. A lion doesn't chase flies, and neither should you. Your silence is not retreat, it's aim. And when you move, it will be exact, surgical, devastating. Let the storm rage. You stay the mountain. Let them shout, let them scheme. Let them spread their bitterness like wildfire. You don't need to shout over the noise. You need only to stand taller than it. Because the mountain does not explain itself to the storm, it simply outlasts it. And when the dust settles, only one will remain standing. Legacy over attention. The world will tempt you to clap back, to expose, to retaliate. Don't. You weren't made for moments. You were made for movements. You don't build a legacy by fighting every battle. You build it by mastering yourself, by choosing stillness over chaos, vision over validation. You don't need to be understood. You need to be unshakable. Let them win the argument. You win the decade. Your enemies are your best marketers. It's funny, isn't it? Your haters are working overtime, spreading your name, whispering your story into rooms you've never stepped foot in. They think they're planting poison, but they're actually planting curiosity. And curiosity is a powerful thing. When someone hears your name laced with anger, they don't just hear the insult. They wonder why. Why does this person evoke so much emotion? Why is someone so pressed, so obsessed? That's how attention starts. And when they look you up, they don't find drama. They find calm, purpose, focus. They find someone so collected, so composed, that their accuser starts to look foolish. You never asked for the spotlight. They handed it to you. You just had to be still long enough for the truth to echo. Envy is a compliment in disguise. Here's what most won't admit. Hate is admiration, twisted by insecurity. They don't hate you because you're weak. They hate you because your strength reminds them of what they're not. Your focus reflects their distraction. Your elevation mocks their stagnation. Your silence reveals their noise. You didn't provoke it, you exposed it. And so they lash out, hoping to reduce you, to drag you back to their level, because down there they feel safer. But you don't descend. You don't kneel to envy. You rise. You keep walking, and every step you take away from them is a step toward your real destiny. The fire of reaction versus the cold of mastery. Reacting feels good for a moment. Firing back, defending yourself, correcting the narrative, it gives you a brief hit of justice. But justice bought with attention is fleeting. It costs your peace. It trades your power for noise, and noise, no matter how loud, is always temporary. But mastery is cold. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need vengeance. It knows that the ultimate revenge is success so undeniable, it doesn't require explanation. Let them light their little fires. You build stone monuments in silence. Let them rage for attention. You build a kingdom that can't be shaken. Stillness is strength, not weakness. Weak people flail. They scream. They claw at everything around them. Strong people don't move unless it's worth it. Stillness is not apathy, it's control. It's knowing you could destroy someone with facts, with truth, with sheer force, and choosing not to. Because you don't fight every fight, you pick the one that wins the war. And when your silence finally ends, if it ever does, your words won't just land, they'll echo. Because the longer you wait to speak, the louder your voice becomes. They want your energy. Don't give it away. Understand this, attention is the currency of power. Whoever holds your attention holds your power. And when you fixate on haters, you've handed them the keys to your mind. They want your focus because they have none of their own. They want to be the center of your thoughts because you're the center of theirs. But you invest that attention like capital. You pour it into work, into strategy, into self-mastery, into becoming so great they choke on your absence. While they're busy trying to slow you down, you're already 3 versions ahead. Let them punch shadows. The most Machiavellian thing you can do? Disappear from their radar while remaining in their mind. Let them prepare attacks for the old you while you've already evolved. Let them spend energy trying to provoke a reaction from a person who no longer even cares. They're shadowboxing, swinging in the dark, hoping to hit something solid, but you're gone, untouchable, off the board. And that's the cruelest fate of all, to be at war with someone who doesn't even know you're fighting. The fear of the unknown is a powerful weapon. There's a reason silence is terrifying. It leaves space. And in that space, their mind fills in the blanks with doubt, fear, worst-case scenarios. They don't know what you'll do next. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know if they've already lost. That uncertainty is heavier than any confrontation, because silence becomes a mirror. And what they see in that mirror is their own weakness, amplified. Let them fear your smile more than your words. Let them fear your silence more than your voice. Because when you say nothing, they have nothing to prepare for. Let them think they've won. That's the setup. Here's where you really turn the knife without touching the handle. Let them believe they've embarrassed you. Let them think they've tricked you. Let them celebrate minor victories. While they're basking in false triumph, you're preparing your next move, quietly, ruthlessly. Victory tastes sweeter when it comes without warning, and nothing screams checkmate like winning a game your enemy didn't know they were still playing. Indifference is legendary. Think of the people you admire most, the ones who changed history, built empires, survived betrayal. Were they loud, or were they calculated, composed, strategic? The world remembers the calm leaders more than the reactive ones. The ones who stayed poised while others panicked, the ones who waited and struck with precision. That's what makes indifference legendary. It isn't coldness, it's clarity. You don't ignore them because you don't care. You ignore them because you care more about your future than their noise. And in the long game, that's the ultimate flex. Weaponized patience. Winning by waiting. There's a certain kind of power that doesn't need to rush. It doesn't need to prove anything. It waits, it watches, and then it strikes. Not loudly, not emotionally, but with terrifying precision. That's the power of patience. The kind of patience that doesn't mean passivity. It means preparation. It means every moment of silence is an investment in a future that your enemy can't even imagine. Because here's the truth. The world is noisy, and noise is weakness. The loudest one in the room is often the one with the least control, but the one who waits, the one who listens, the one who moves only when it matters, that's the one who wins. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Let's talk about that smile, the one that doesn't sparkle, doesn't invite, doesn't reveal anything. It's not warm, it's not cold, it's unreadable, and that's what makes it devastating. Because when someone who hates you sees you smiling without effort, without strain, just calm, poised composure, they don't know what to do with that. They want you to flinch, they want you to engage, they want you to scream, to cry, to collapse. But instead, they get serenity. And serenity is confusing, it's frustrating, it leaves them doubting everything. That smile says, I'm not reacting, I'm not surprised, I'm not impressed. It's a silent declaration of superiority, and worst of all, it's unshakable. Let them exhaust themselves. People who rely on manipulation, gossip, and sabotage, they need chaos to survive. So what happens when you don't give them chaos? They spiral, they escalate, they reach harder, they shout louder, they start swinging wildly, hoping for a hit, and with every failed attempt, their position weakens. Meanwhile, you don't even need to raise your voice. You just keep showing up, calm, confident, building, creating, growing, and eventually they burn out. They have no fuel left, because the only thing feeding their fire was your attention, and you never gave it. Let them run out of gas. Let them collapse under the weight of their own bitterness. You'll still be standing. Psychological war, death by doubt. This isn't about revenge, it's about erosion. When you refuse to engage with pettiness, you don't just avoid conflict, you reverse it. You turn their aggression inward, because the human mind is fragile when it's not validated. They'll start to question themselves. Why didn't he respond? Is he planning something? Did I even matter? And that doubt, that's the real warfare. It's the whisper that eats away at their confidence. The silence that makes them rethink every move. The vacuum that turns their strategy into dust. You win not by shouting louder, but by letting their own mind become the battlefield. Dignity is the ultimate defense. You don't need to fight every rumor. You don't need to defend every lie. Because dignity is louder than denial. Your composure is the evidence. Your results are the testimony. Your silence is the statement. When people see someone attacked, but that person never stoops, never breaks character, they start to wonder. And the longer you hold that frame, the more undeniable your strength becomes. In the end, your restraint isn't just for you, it becomes an example for others. A message, a warning. I don't explain myself, I elevate myself. Fear the one who says nothing. There's a reason kings speak last. The one who watches silently, who doesn't rush, who observes everyone else lose control. That's the person no one wants to cross. Because you never know what they're thinking. You never know what they're planning. You never know when they'll act, or if they already have. And that mystery is far more powerful than any threat. A loud man may throw a punch, but a quiet man might be the architect of the entire room you're standing in. Fear the one who doesn't speak. He already knows how the story ends. You're not cold. You're calculated. They'll call you cold, uncaring, detached, arrogant. Let them. That's what people say when their games don't work. That's what they say when silence leaves them exposed. You're not cold. You're calculated. You're conserving energy. You're not distracted by noise. You're not feeding chaos. You're building something bigger, something they'll never understand until it's too late. Let them think you're heartless. Let them mistake control for cruelty. Because when the dust settles, they won't see a monster. They'll see a monument. Every attack is a confession. When someone attacks you, unprovoked, loudly, repeatedly, they're not just making a move against you. They're revealing themselves, their fear, their insecurity, their desperation. Every insult is a mirror. Every rumor is an admission. Every angry outburst screams, "You threaten me." The more they obsess over you, the more they expose that you've already won something far more valuable than attention, space in their mind. You didn't ask for that space. You just moved with purpose, and they couldn't take it. Let them keep talking. Every word they throw at you is a crack in their armor. The loudest man in the room is always the weakest. You've seen it before. The one who always has something to say, who has to prove, defend, argue. That's not strength. That's instability with a microphone. Power doesn't perform. Power doesn't seek approval. True power walks in and doesn't need to announce itself. It changes the atmosphere. It changes the room. And when it leaves, it's still felt. Your haters are performers. Actors in a drama they wrote but can't control. You're the director, the one who decides whether the scene even matters. Most times it doesn't. Your silence is a statement. There's a moment when the chaos is at its peak, when the pressure builds, when everyone expects you to respond, and you don't. That's when silence speaks loudest. It says, "You're not worth the energy." It says, "This isn't my level." It says, "I'm too busy building to play this game." And it hits harder than any rebuttal ever could. Because silence forces people to look inward, to question themselves, to sit alone with the noise they created. And the more they search for your reaction, the more painfully they realize there won't be one. That's when the unraveling begins. They want a reaction. You give a result. Your haters want you to explode, to react, to engage. Why? Because if you react, you validate them. You confirm their significance. But when you stay calm, focused, productive, you steal their narrative. They scream, and you publish a book. They slander, and you launch a brand. They plot, and you level up again. They start to see it's not working, that the attacks aren't landing, that the person they're fighting has outgrown the battle. And that realization is more devastating than defeat. It's insignificance. Let them think you're losing, then rise in silence. There's a kind of victory that's not announced with fireworks, but with footsteps. You disappear for a while. You don't defend. You don't deny. You don't post vague status updates. You just work. And then one day, without warning, you emerge, transformed, elevated, unreachable. And the people who hated you, who mocked you, who thought they buried you, they're now stuck watching you rise in silence, unable to stop it, unable to understand it. That's not just victory, that's legend. Because the best comebacks don't require applause. They only need silence and consistency. Every word you withhold builds gravity. Words are like currency. Spend them too freely, and they lose value. But when you speak sparingly, when you let silence stretch, the moment you finally speak, it lands like a hammer. That's the paradox. Silence gives your voice weight. Every insult you ignore adds to your authority. Every rumor you walk past adds to your mystique. Every drama you don't enter makes people wonder what you're really capable of. And when the time comes to speak, to act, they listen. Because they know you don't speak without purpose. You're not in the mud, you're in the sky. Let them wrestle, let them post, let them subtweet, let them throw punches into thin air. You don't belong in that arena. You're not made for the pit, you're made for the peaks. Your goals are too high to be tripped by petty. Your mission is too vast to detour for drama. They want to pull you down, you stay in the clouds. Because here's the truth, you never win in the mud. Even if you beat them, you're still covered in dirt. But when you don't step in, you're untouchable. Silence turns the crowd. You don't need to convince the world. You don't need to go online, type paragraph after paragraph, explain your truth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just need to wait. Because truth has gravity. And when you're still, when you're silent, people start to lean in. They start to notice. They wonder, why hasn't he responded? That curiosity grows. And eventually, silence becomes louder than any defense could ever be. Because the crowd always turns, not for those who shout the most, but for those who carry themselves with quiet conviction. Let your stillness do what noise never could. Change minds without saying a word. Each action you take becomes a silent declaration. Let's be honest, anyone can argue, anyone can clap back, but not everyone can build. Not everyone can stay focused. Not everyone can walk forward while being dragged by rumor, hate, or betrayal. So when you take action in silence, when you work while they gossip, it makes a statement. I don't need to defend. I don't need to lower myself. I'm already outgrowing this. Every move you make becomes proof, not of your innocence, but of your discipline, your value, your vision. And they'll feel that in the pit of their stomach while you pass them without even looking. They want you to explain. You give them distance. When the hate starts to rise, people will expect you to speak, to explain, to clear your name. Don't. Because the moment you try to explain yourself to someone who's already judged you, you're not clearing your name. You're shrinking it. You're stepping into a courtroom where the verdict has already been written in ink. Let them write. Let them speak. You don't correct lies. You eclipse them. By rising, quietly, powerfully, without permission, without a press release. Let the truth age like firewood lies spread quickly. That's their nature. But truth is firewood. It doesn't catch instantly. But when it does, it burns hotter, longer, and with less effort. You don't need to light the fire. You just need to stack the wood. Your consistency, your silence, your character, your results. And one day people will feel the warmth and trace it back to you. Let the liars run cold while you build a legacy that never fades. Mastery is being unbothered while winning. You've seen this before. The insecure ones win a small argument and act like they've conquered a kingdom. Let them. You're not after moments, you're after movements. Mastery is being calm when they scream, composed when they accuse, productive when they provoke. And when you win, it won't be with noise, it'll be with stature. You won't need to say a word. They'll already know. Because no one forgets the person who rose without responding, who succeeded without explaining, who won without ever stepping into the fight. You build in private, you arrive in power. Privacy is your greatest asset. Let them post, let them rant, let them campaign against a version of you they don't understand anymore. You're building in the dark, quietly, thoughtfully. And when you emerge, it won't be subtle. It'll be undeniable. That's the power of restraint. It delays gratification, but multiplies impact. Your silence becomes the wind-up before the punch, the calm before the conquest. And when you finally arrive, you don't knock. You own the door. When you speak, it's a conclusion, not a conversation. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Most people speak to be heard. Strategists speak to be remembered. So when you finally speak, don't respond. Don't defend. Don't react. Declare. Let your words close chapters. Let them define reality. Let them sound like judgment, not dialogue. Because by the time you speak, it's too late for discussion. The decision has already been made, and that's what makes your silence sacred. It builds pressure. It builds tension. And when you finally release it, the world has no choice but to pay attention. How enemies destroy themselves in your silence. The most powerful victories are the ones you don't have to fight for. You stay silent. You stay focused. You stay above. And as you do, they burn themselves out. Why? Because hate requires resistance. It feeds on reaction. But when there's nothing to push against, when you don't flinch, don't speak, don't play, the energy turns inward. They begin to unravel. Their hate rots from the inside. Their lies collapse under their own weight. Their schemes implode in desperation. You didn't lay a finger on them. You just gave them the space to collapse. And they did the rest. You don't survive them. You outlive them. You're not trying to fight fire with fire. You're outlasting the flame, because hate burns fast. But legacy? Legacy smolders. It roots. It grows quietly underground until one day it rises, untouchable, undeniable. That's what your silence does. It doesn't just protect you, it plants something. And by the time they realize you weren't reacting, you were building, they'll look up and see a structure so tall, they'll never reach it. You didn't just survive their noise, you outlived their relevance. They can't compete with who you're becoming. Most enemies are trying to fight the version of you that no longer exists. They think they're dragging you down when you've already moved beyond them. They think they're damaging your name while you're making it into a brand. Let them. Because here's the cruel twist of fate. They're still at war with your shadow, and you're already at peace with your future. They'll throw arrows at the echo of someone who's become unrecognizable. And that's the difference between noise and evolution. Noise demands attention. But evolution, it happens in silence. And then it speaks for itself. You don't just rise, you become unreachable. There's one victory greater than revenge, greater than success. Distance. Not physical, psychological. It's when they scream and you don't hear it. When they insult and it never reaches you. When they beg for your failure and it has no effect. Because you're gone. Not gone from the world, but from their world. You've become too disciplined, too elevated, too focused. And they realize something brutal. They were never your enemy. They were your fuel. Short-term clashes versus long-term conquests. Ask yourself, do you want to win arguments or do you want to win empires? Because every time you take the bait, every time you clap back, fire off, explain, you're giving away what matters most. Time, energy, attention. And attention is life. It's your currency. Don't spend it on people who can't return the value. Let them have their petty victories. Let them win the skirmishes. You're not here to fight skirmishes. You're here to conquer the decade. And when they look back, they won't remember their insults. They'll remember your rise. You're not competing. You're reigning. There's a shift that happens when you stop trying to outdo others and start building a world where competition doesn't exist. Not because you've won, but because you've transcended. Your silence says, I'm not playing your game. And when you exit the game, you also exit their reach. They're playing checkers. You're playing for legacy. Let them keep score. You're building something too massive to measure, and one day they'll realize you didn't just win. You changed the entire board. Who hurts the most when you stay silent? Here's the paradox. When someone attacks you and you say nothing, You'd think you're the one taking the hit, but it's not you who bleeds. It's them. Because your silence, it doesn't signal weakness, it signals mastery. And that mastery cuts deeper than any insult. They expected you to fight. They needed you to fight. Because if you fight back, it justifies their obsession, their behavior, their existence. But when you remain unmoved, you strip them of all purpose. You leave them shouting into the void, wounded by their own echo. They wanted to drag you into the arena. You walked off the stage. Conflict needs two players. Drama needs two characters. And when you refuse to enter the ring, you don't just protect yourself, you starve them. You take away their spotlight, their relevance, their entire performance. You don't have to win the fight. You just have to not show up. Because by the time the dust settles, everyone will remember one thing: who was calm and who was desperate. And desperation always looks bad under the lights. Disappearing from their radar is the ultimate power move. You want to know what real dominance looks like? It's when they stalk your every move, and you're not even watching theirs. It's when they speak your name, and you forgot theirs. It's when they try to get a reaction from someone who isn't even available emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. You've gone ghost, not as an escape, but as a strategy. Because presence can be a trap, and absence can be control. When you vanish from their system, they lose all ability to manipulate you. You're no longer accessible, no longer predictable, and that makes you dangerous. Self-control, the crown of kings. Let's be honest, anyone can yell, anyone can tweet, anyone can fire back, rant, or throw a punch. But you know what's rare? Restraint, self-control. That's king-level energy. That's the mark of someone who doesn't bend to emotion, who doesn't flinch when provoked. It's knowing, I could burn this down, I could expose the truth, I could retaliate, but I won't, because I'm not moved by them. I'm moved by vision, and that alone puts you in a different category. Your power lies in what you don't react to. Think of your attention like sunlight. Whatever you shine it on grows. So when you react to drama, guess what grows? Drama. But when you ignore it, starve it, focus on your mission instead, drama dies. Hate dies. Ego dies. You're not building a life that constantly answers noise. You're building a life that outlasts it. Because some things aren't worth correcting, some people aren't worth addressing, and some battles aren't even real. They're illusions. Created to distract you. Ignore them. You're not here to chase shadows. You're here to cast one. They're not in your world anymore. There's a shift, subtle but seismic, when you realize they're not fighting you. They're fighting a version of you that's already gone. They're swinging at smoke. Arguing with memory. You've leveled up. You've changed your rhythm, changed your reach, changed your requirements. And they're stuck in an old story, replaying scenes from a chapter you've already closed. Let them. While they're reliving history, you're writing your future. And you don't owe them a cameo. Silence, the language of empire builders. You don't hear kings scream in the streets. You don't see CEOs clapping back in the comments. And you never catch true legends wasting energy on people they've already surpassed. Because empire builders don't talk, they build. They don't argue, they architect. They don't respond, they rise. Silence isn't absence. It's elevation. It's saying, while you were watching me, I was designing something you'll never reach. And by the time they notice, it's already too late. The foundation is laid, the doors are closed, and you're already floors above the noise. Emotions are wild horses. You are the reins. Emotions are not your enemy. They're power, raw power, but only when tamed. An untamed emotion lashes out, reacts, betrays strategy. But a mastered emotion? That's force, focused. It becomes timing, precision, control. And control is everything. It's the separator between the ruler and the ruled. You're not suppressing your fire. You're directing it. You're choosing where it burns. When it burns. If it burns. Because fire without intention is chaos. But fire with discipline, that's revolution. Don't respond with words, respond with greatness. They want you to argue. They want your voice, they want your pain, but you don't owe them sound, you owe yourself results. So when they lie, you publish. When they mock, you lead. When they sabotage, you scale. Your response isn't a quote tweet, it's a title, a platform, a legacy. And the most Machiavellian move you can make is to succeed so relentlessly, so undeniably, that even their hate becomes a footnote in your rise. When the dust settles, they become the witnesses. Haters don't disappear. They watch. They watch from the sidelines they built for you, but never imagined you'd escape. And now they sit in the crowd they once tried to convince. They become the very audience for the success they tried to prevent. Their words? Forgotten. Your results? Permanent. That's the final twist. They didn't stop your story. They became characters in it. Background noise to a crescendo they couldn't silence. Reaction is an impulse. Strategy is a decision. A reaction says, I'm emotional. A strategy says, I'm intentional. When you react, you lose your position. You lose your view. You stoop. But when you choose to hold still, to breathe, observe, and act only when the moment is right, you become a force, a quiet, steady, irreversible force. Let others be loud, you be lasting. They can't take what you don't give. Understand this, the only way someone can steal your peace is if you hand it over. The only way they enter your mind is if you leave the door open. And the only way they define your story is if you pause long enough to read their version. Don't. Keep moving, keep climbing, keep building. Your life is not a debate, it's a declaration. And your silence, that's the seal. Legacy is built in quiet. Let them talk, let them rant, let them accuse. You build. You build when it's dark. You build when it's lonely. You build when it's misunderstood. Because legacy doesn't begin with noise. It begins with a blueprint. While they spend their breath trying to explain who you are, you're spending your days becoming someone they can't describe anymore. And by the time they finally look up, it's not you they see, it's the empire you left behind. Enemies aren't defeated, they're outpaced. You don't need to destroy them, you just need to stop waiting for them. Because the moment you stop playing at their speed, responding, justifying, reacting, is the moment you begin to fly. Not run. Not sprint, fly. And from that altitude, the noise doesn't reach you anymore. Their opinions, muffled. Their schemes, delayed. Their hate, harmless. Because the truth is, most enemies aren't obstacles, they're anchors. And when you cut them loose, not with anger, but with indifference, you rise. You don't bury them, you leave them behind. The summit has no echo. When you finally reach that level, that altitude where few can breathe, you'll notice something. Silence. Not because there's nothing to say, but because no one can touch you there. You've entered rare air, not because you fought your way in, but because you refused to be dragged out. The haters are still screaming, but it's quiet now. Their voices don't echo up here. You've become untouchable. Not by domination, but by distance. And in the end, that's what terrifies them most, that you didn't silence them. You just rose so high, they became irrelevant. Your absence becomes your power. There will come a moment when they realize you're not coming back. You're not replying. You're not explaining. You're not playing. And in that realization comes fear, because your absence proves everything they tried to deny, that you were never competing with them, that you were never threatened by them, that you were already building a life where they didn't matter. And now, they don't. You never needed to be loud. You just needed to be gone. You don't need to outshout the doubters. You don't need to confront the accusers. You don't need to gather witnesses to your worth. You just need to keep showing up in the future they said you'd never reach. You just need to be so consistent, so relentless, so focused that your existence is the rebuttal. Let them play judge. You write history. The ones who couldn't stop you will one day quote you. Strange, isn't it? The people who doubted you will study you. The ones who attacked you will cite you. The ones who tried to block you will build on the roads you paved. Because time is loyal to the focused. And silence Silence never forgets. It records, it stacks, it prepares. Until one day, the world doesn't ask, "Where have you been?" It asks, "How did we not see it coming?" And that's when you smile. Not to mock, not to gloat, but because everything they said you couldn't do, you did. Quietly. The final form of power. Quiet majesty, you've made it. Not just through the conflict, not just through the rumors, but through yourself. You've silenced the noise, not by force, but by frequency. You don't exist where they shout anymore. Your altitude has changed, and so has your air. This is what real power looks like. Not domination, but detachment. Not fame, but focus. Not applause, but alignment. You walk through rooms they tried to lock you out of. You occupy spaces they said you'd never reach. And the best part, you never had to shout to get there. Presence without explanation. You walk in silence now, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you no longer need to. Your presence explains itself. Your discipline declares your power. Your stillness reminds the world that control is louder than noise. When people look at you, they don't just see someone who succeeded. They see someone who endured, who outgrew, who outlasted. And that's the rarest kind of victory, the one you don't need to narrate, because it lives in your results. You are no longer reactionary, you are legendary. Legends are not remembered for how loudly they argued. They're remembered for how unshakably they moved. And now that's you. You are the silence that unnerved them. You are the absence that haunted them. You are the result that embarrassed them. You didn't defeat them with revenge. You defeated them with irrelevance. And now they talk about you, not with bitterness, but with awe. Because deep down they know they lost the moment you stopped responding. They lost the moment you smiled and moved on. Your smile was never weakness, it was the signal. It wasn't just a grin, it was a closing curtain, it was a quiet dagger, it was the final punctuation. It said, "I see you. I'm not impressed. I'm not coming back." You didn't yell, you didn't beg, you didn't retaliate, you just smiled. And then you vanished into greatness, into growth, into a life they could never follow you into. That's why the smile is legendary, because it didn't just say goodbye. It said, "You were never in my league to begin with." Your story ends where their obsession does. They will eventually grow quiet, not because they've found peace, but because they've run out of energy. You didn't end the war. You made it irrelevant. You simply outlived their purpose. And now your story isn't about them. It never really was. It's about what happens when someone refuses to descend, when someone keeps building, when someone says nothing and wins everything. The final smile. So here it is, that smile again. Not bitter, not arrogant, but calm, clear, free. It says, "I remember what you said. I remember what you tried. I remember how loud it got. And I still didn't fall. Not because I fought harder, but because I stood still while you collapsed." That's the final victory. The kind they can't respond to. The kind they'll never outrun. The kind they'll remember, even as you forget them. Let the record show you didn't shout. You didn't strike. You didn't stoop. You smiled. You focused. You rose. You reigned. Quietly. Permanently. Absolutely. That is the Machiavellian way. That is the power of silence. That is you. You don't need to shout to be powerful. You don't need to be seen to be strategic. Sometimes the most magnetic force in the room is the one that says nothing, but moves with purpose. Let the chaos rage. You stay still. That's how empires begin. Now it's your move. If this story spoke to something deep in you, don't just scroll, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember their power. And in the comments, tell me, what's one thing you're ready to let go of? To reclaim your focus.